together at the mountaintop, champions of college football.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the first Bowling Green episode of the Coach of the Couch Potato. As always, I'm Jeremy the Couch Potato. Opposite side of the screen, we got Coach Slate. We are brought to you guys by the Barn Baseball and Softball Academy and a very, very, very happy Bowling Green alumni in Jake Moore of Cornerstone Home Remodeling. Obviously, we're throwing a spoiler out there, but what's good, sir? How's your week been?
Oh man, it's been pretty good. Had some sickness go through the house. My middle child, kids they're just tougher than us, man. They are just tougher than us. But everybody's healthy. Everybody bounced back. Had some gymnastics this weekend up in Sandusky. We traveled up to your family's area.
Yeah.
And at Kalahari, our oldest went out there and performed well. Had her best showing on the beam.
Nice.
Had her highest score. She scored a 9.7, which was pretty good. So we were excited for her. So she did a good job. But yeah, man, busy weekend. Pretty low key Sunday though. CrossFit Open, kicking my wife's butt per usual. But we're just out here grinding, man. How's everything with you?
We're good. Pretty low-key week as well. We had some sectional bowling this weekend. The boys finished 5th in their sectional. Top 4 move on to nationals.
Okay.
So that's a little heartbreaking. Couple of seniors, 3 seniors that are all awesome guys. 2 are Jaden's roommates, very good friends. So to see those guys kind of have to deal with a little bit of heartbreak. Especially when they shoot a score that would have got them in at the other 3 sectional sites.
Yeah.
So, but lesson learned, don't put yourself in that spot to where you get the tough draw. It's like any sport, kind of like what the basketball Buckeyes are going to probably be looking at this time next Sunday.
Yeah.
Don't put yourself in a spot. So yeah, we still got the NAIA Nationals. The heartbreaker for me is I've never flown in my life.
Okay.
And when we found out nationals were in Vegas, I was like, man, if you guys make it, we won't be there. Well, then I realized yesterday, nationals is the same weekend as WrestleMania, and WrestleMania is in Vegas.
Okay.
So my wheels started spinning. I was like Googling best airlines for fat people, WrestleMania tickets. Like I was on one. So I was trying to have my plan in place.
My gosh.
Unfortunately the bowling gods weren't with us. Like, this afternoon we'd have a good block. They did blocks of 4 games. So we would shoot like 850. The team that we're competing with for the last spot would shoot 920. So you're shooting a good number and you're still losing pins.
Yeah.
Just a terrible combination.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll see though. It stinks, but sophomore year's wrapping up academically and bowling wise. Really, he'll be home, tomorrow for spring break. So crazy to think. Now we got to try to find an internship or something for the summer. So if anybody's listening, accounting major, needs some summer help. But yeah, every time we think we're going to have a low key week, I mean, nothing major this week for the Buckeyes. So I'm going to pivot from our list that we talked about since we are now a Bowling Green Ohio State podcast.
Yeah.
Bowling Green. So they lost their head coach to the Eagles kind of unexpectedly.
Yeah.
And so you kind of have to scramble at that point. So what do they do but go to Nashville, Tennessee, and bring Eddie George back to the state of Ohio?
Yeah.
I've made no bones about, my admiration for Eddie George. You can see Eddie George over my shoulder. You can see the 27 in my name. I don't know that they could have nailed this more.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I think Eddie George has done Coach George has done a really good job at Tennessee State. When you looked at the resurgence of these former players going to these HBCUs, you were historically black colleges, you were you didn't know what you were going to get. You were getting a mixed bag. You were going to get situations like we saw with Ed Reed, right? Where Ed Reed wasn't getting the funding and the different things he needed to succeed at the school that he was at. You were getting situations like with Primetime where Jackson State was all in, right? And then you were getting situations like Tennessee State where Tennessee State was kind of going under the radar, but they were giving Eddie the things that he needed to succeed, right? And Eddie's done a really good job. He's brought in NFL caliber coaches. He's brought in high level college coaches. He's brought in, guys from Ohio State. He had Michael Brewster down there. He's got Richard McNutt with him down there. And so he's brought in some quality guys. He's recruited at a high clip. A guy that I actually played with at Urbana, his son is an absolute stud. His last name's Sharp. He actually chose to go to Tennessee State over some MAC offers because he believed in what Eddie George was building down there. And I believe he actually had a Bowling Green offer. So it will be interesting to see if he goes with him. And so I think Eddie was actually building something. And he played with the Titans. His whole entire life was, after his playing career, was in Tennessee. Like that was where he was at. And so to see him now, and they saw that trending in the right direction, right? So if I'm Bowling Green, I'm going to go get a big name. Players or recruits are going to gravitate to that.
Oh, yeah.
Especially in the state of Ohio. If I can go play for a guy like Eddie George, right? If I'm not going to go to Ohio State and I'm in the state of Ohio, if I'm not going to go to UC, then I'm going to go play for Eddie George. Why? Because Eddie George has an NFL pedigree. And Eddie George is a, borderline Hall of Famer where he's, regarded and revered as one of the best running backs in NFL history. Obviously, one of the best running backs in college football history. This is a guy I want to go play for. And so, listen, I think Bowling Green did a great job. This is a good guy. He's going to come in. He's going to be there for a while. I don't think he's chasing jobs. I really don't. I don't get that vibe from him at all. I know people will think like, oh, he's just waiting for Ryan Day to leave. Like, I don't, first off, I don't think Coach Day is leaving anytime soon. Second of all, I don't get the vibe that is what Eddie George wants to do. I think once he's committed to something, he's going to be there for a little bit. And I think he's going to try to build something really good at Bowling Green. And I think, he'll have the ability and the funding and the NIL opportunities in Bowling Green to go out and build something really good in the MAC. And so it's a good job by Bowling Green, man, to pinpoint their guy and go out and get him. Yeah,
I'm excited. I saw that yesterday when it became that he was emerging, and then today that he accepted the offer, and it's like, it's kind of surreal. It's a full circle moment, though. Eddie George's first touchdown at Ohio State came against Bowling Green.
Yeah. I saw that today on Twitter.
Like I said, so obviously now we will pay a little bit of attention to Bowling Green. Obviously we like to talk all things football anyway. So on the Buckeye front, though, speaking of hires, we've really pounded these last couple weeks about how great of a job Ryan Day is doing with these analysts and quality control guys. And 2 more hires this week, both on the defensive side of the ball again. So he's really shoring up. He's bringing in guys who, make no bones about it. Jim Knowles was a really, really good defensive coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
We can have our thoughts about the way everything seemingly went down. We can, if you feel betrayed, whatever. But okay, so now we bring in Matt Patricia, who we'll talk about Matt Patricia more. Coach Day actually spoke to the press this week for the first time in a minute. Taver Johnson, I know you're excited about this one, so I'm going to let you just go talk about all things Taver.
Yeah, Taver Johnson was a guy who was with the Buckeyes, was hired under Coach Tress. I believe he was here from 2007 to 2011.
Yep.
He left the Buckeyes, and I believe he went to – didn't he become a head coach? I can't remember all off the top of my head.
Yeah, he's had a lot of
but he's been all over the place. He's been at Eastern Michigan. He's just been up and down, and the verdict is still out on whether or not people believe he's a good coach. In Ohio State world, there's a lot of people that believe that he was not the best coach because they didn't believe he was the best recruiter. Totally understand that, right? I think he's been really respected because he has a lot of NFL experience. He's got a lot of ties to a lot of good people and a lot of good staffs. And I will always side with Jim Tressel. If Jim Tressel trusted you to coach an elite secondary that the Buckeyes had in those years and some of the studs that we had in that secondary, then I'm a firm believer that you were a good coach. Now, understand what we're bringing him in for. You're talking about bringing in a guy who's got a ton of experience, who is just going to be an extra set of eyes, and it's not going to be tasked with being a recruiter. We're going to be asking you to do what your strength is, and that's coach. Okay. And so that is what we're paying you to do. We're not paying you to do the things that you may have struggled at. Taver Johnson is 51 years old, right? And so you're getting him in the twilight of his career. This may be the end of the road for him. He may not want to leave the spot, depending on what he's getting paid. If he's getting paid $250,000, might be what he does for the next 5 years of his career, and he rides off into the sunset, right? This is something that is great for these guys who are in that phase of their career where they're up and down. The one thing I will tell people who consider these coaches not good coaches, if you keep getting jobs, there's something that people think you are good at. People can talk about nepotism and all these things. This is people's livelihoods. They're not just going to go hire somebody because they're their buddy, right? I'm just telling you that there are some people who will go out of their way to make sure they hire their guys, but if their job's on the line, they're not just going to go hire their buddy, right? They're going to go hire the guys that are going to help them win and go back to back on a national championship run. I think Taver Johnson adds more and more experience. You're talking about guys. Look at the secondary now. Look at the guys we have with Matt Guerrieri, with Tim Walton, and now you add Taver Johnson. I mean, it's just to me, you're just adding to an already an elite secondary coaching backfield. The one thing I am upset about, and it's not official, but based on some Twitter stuff that I've seen, my guy, Coach Duhart, does not look like he's going to be returning to Ohio State as the assistant secondary coach. Coach Duhart, man, is going to be a superstar coach. This dude is an absolute dog. He's just been rising up the ranks, came from Michigan State, bet on himself, came to Ohio State, worked his way up. He's going to move on. He's going to find something else. Northwest Ohio guy, Toledo Central Catholic guy. I know he's going to land on his feet somewhere. Well respected. So I'm excited to see where he lands. Obviously going to be following him. Wish he was still a Buckeye, but to get a guy like Taver Johnson in here, I think is a really good move for Ryan Day.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, this is a guy who has NFL time with the Raiders, the Eagles, a little bit of defensive coordinator experience at Temple.
There it is, right there.
Was with Tennessee last year. Was a associate head coach at Arkansas. I mean, this guy's got a ton of experience. He coached Malcolm Jenkins and Chimdi Chekwa, for God's sake. I mean, yes, okay. If recruiting's your shortfall, it doesn't mean you can't coach. And this is going to be what we've talked about. OG Walt now has a right hand.
Yeah.
So when OG Walt is helping Matt Patricia scheme up things, the corners are still getting coached up.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up, because we're going to talk about the press conferences here in a little bit. But Ryan Day is so strategic in the way that he talks, man. That I've really started to catch on to that a lot more recently. You can tell he's really comfortable now as a head football coach. I mean, you can really tell. The way that he talks about Coach Walt and his football smarts, you can tell he was really on the brink of making Coach Walton the full-time defensive coordinator. Mm-hmm. But he knows how what's the word I'm looking for? How strong and how much he's needed in the recruiting world, that he didn't want to lose that side of it. But man, the way that he talks about Coach Walton when it comes to his football acumen, like we cannot underestimate that. Like that is something that we need to really pay attention to. And that is something that Coach Day really wants to tap into. And I think he believes that Coach Patricia will be able to help bring that out of Coach Walton. So something to really keep an eye on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's becoming very – it's like you can tell winning the Natty has relieved him to where that – and he hit on this. We'll just go ahead and throw it out there. In the press conference, he said the biggest thing he learned this season was to trust the process and just keep pushing.
Yeah.
So the process is you being a CEO, and we're seeing that.
Yeah.
But we'll dive into the presser here just in a minute. Second hire, just like we've saw kind of with the first batch of defensive hires, you bring in a more experienced coach, you bring in a younger guy. So the younger guy brought in this cycle is Miguel Patrick, has been the D-line coach for Trenton Dilfer at UAB the last 2 years. Was not retained this year, but you're starting to see a trend, and I don't know who Dilfer brought in for the position, to where these NFL guys that are coaching now are bringing in their guys. You're seeing it with Dion, and it's working for Dion somewhat. You're going to see it, I think, with this influx of hires at the HBCU level that we talked about, because it was Deshaun Jackson got a job, Mike Vick. I mean, you're going to see NFL guys breaking into the coaching game more and more.
Yeah.
So Patrick was at UAB, was an OSU QC in 2022. Before that, he was a high school coach in Georgia, 3 state titles, 2 as a DC and 1 as a head coach. Georgia high school football, basically I look at it, Ohio, Texas, Georgia, Florida, California, and in PA to an extent, but Georgia's the real deal. So to win 3 state titles down there, this is kind of the Alan Clark replacement, which we've made no bones about what we think about Alan Clark too.
Yeah. Listen, this Coach Patrick is somebody that I am a big fan of. When he came here in 2022, this is a guy at spring practice and at the coaches clinic that I personally made a beeline for, because these are guys that I always want to go out of my way and make sure that I'm paying my respect to, because they are in the trenches just like us as a high school football coach. I want people to understand, like, this coaching thing is like a true fraternity. And so when you see these coaches who are in the trenches as a high school defensive coordinator, a high school assistant coach, work their way up the ladder, become a head coach, find success, they parlay that into becoming a defensive quality control coach at Ohio State, because that's what they want to do. That's their goal. Like, you want to celebrate that, right? Because that's betting on themselves. They could stay in those high school roles and they could do that for the rest of their lives. And in Georgia and the schools in the South, they're getting paid well. I could promise you they're not getting a $3,500 stipend for football. I can promise you that in those southern states, okay? They can get paid very well to do that. But this is a guy who said, I'm going to go bet on myself. And he had an opportunity because of the players that he, was developing. High school or college coaches notice that, okay, like it seems like every time I go to this guy's school, he's developing some really good talent. Maybe this is a guy that I want to bring on my staff so that he can help me recruit this area, right? And that's something that Ohio State recognized that they needed, okay? And so they went out and they said, hey, we've got the spot for you. Here, Coach Patrick, we want you to come up, be a QC guy for us, learn under Larry Johnson, right? And so I remember when I got to meet him, I remember shaking his hand and just telling him, hey, man, like, I appreciate your hustle. I appreciate your grind, man. This is something that, gives people like me, gives people, like I respect in this industry, a lot of hope and a lot of just respect for the hustle and the grind that you've put into this. And now look at, like, he's worked his way up to being a position coach. Now he's back with Ohio State. Like, it's an up and down, right? It's a business. Things don't go your way all the time. But this is a guy who's truly bettered himself. This is a guy who's familiar with Larry Johnson. He's familiar with guys that are already on this roster, and Kenyatta Jackson and Caden Curry. Like, these are guys that he's familiar with. Again, I think this is another good hire. He knows the way Ryan Day wants to do things. He knows the way that Larry Johnson wants to do things. And this guy, again, continuity thing, and he's got ties to the South, okay? He's got ties to Georgia. You need to be able to recruit the state of Georgia, especially in the trenches, if you want to be a dominant team up front. We see that with Cade McDonald, right? He is a dominant player for us. He's going to be a dominant player for us. We've got to be able to continue to recruit the state of Georgia, and he's going to help us do that. And so I'm happy to see Coach Patrick back. He's a stud, man. And I know things may not have worked out at UAB for him, but trust me, the role that he's going to be in with the Buckeyes, it's a really good role. Continue to develop and learn under Coach Johnson. He could parlay that into something else even bigger with the Buckeyes.
Yeah, absolutely. It was funny that you hit on, Georgia high school football coaches aren't coaching for $3,500. Russ Probst is definitely not coaching for $3,500.
No, no.
You know, that's a throwback name, but I couldn't
Yeah.
pass up throwing it.
No, it's the truth, man.
So Coach Day did talk to the press this week. I just wrote down some bullet points. You know, obviously, I'm sure you've got some too. And then some of the assistant coaches talked as well. So obviously, the first thing that I circled to talk about, the CJ Hicks to edge move is official. We thought it was coming. And the feedback from guys all over are stoked. I mean, I can't remember if it might have been Mecca Don. It was either Mecca Don or Chimdi Chekwa. One of those guys labeled CJ Hicks the next Abdul Carter. Like, that's huge praise, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, Abdul Carter was a guy who was a junior or a sophomore. I think Abdul Carter had one more year left, I believe. I could be wrong. But he was a guy last year who was a linebacker. And they moved him to defensive end. Like, he's literally in the same position. And so CJ Hicks being moved to full-time defensive end, that is huge. One thing, and I told my dad this, I'm interested to see if this is just me wondering. I wonder if CJ Hicks went into the office and said, listen, we know what you need to do. Like, put me at defensive end. This is just what's going to happen. I wonder if that was even a conversation, or if it was just him saying, hey, Coach Day, like, I'm playing defensive end or I'm transferring. You know what I mean? Like, I just wonder if it was one of those situations, because I think after 3 years,
the writing's on the wall.
The writing's on the wall, man. You see Arvell Reese kind of jump you on the depth chart. Like, okay, like, I want to get on the field. What's the best way that I can get to the next level? It's as a defensive end. And, you know, if you see CJ Hicks in person, he's legitimately 6'3". He's legitimately 240 pounds. He's legitimately a freak of nature. And he is, I guarantee he'll probably play between 245 and 255 pounds. They will not want him to lose his speed. And he will be, you know, maybe not an every down guy, but he'll be a huge part of that rotation. I fully expect him to have between, you know, 5.5 and 10 sacks next year. Like, I think he could have that type of season for us, you know, depending on the situational things that he gets in. I just think he's going to be a situational player for us that could do a lot of good things for us. And I'm excited for him, man. I'm glad it's going to be, you know, not another Baron Browning situation where we don't do it until the very end of his senior year. We just go ahead and make it happen in the spring.
Baron Browning, who just got paid today.
Yes, he did.
The exit ramp. The NFL is drunk today.
Oh my gosh! Yeah.
But if we have some time at the end, we'll talk about that. But so obviously, you know, the biggest question mark of the whole offseason cycle, you know, was the Matt Patricia hire. A couple of things Coach Day said that hit home with me. The defense will look different. Yeah. I don't know if that means we're going back to too high a lot of the time. You know, if you're not going to see Caleb down in the box like we did. Obviously, it's Caleb Downs' world, and we're just living in it. So I think whatever Caleb Downs wants, Caleb Downs is going to get. And then the other thing about Matt Patricia was that Day and Ohio State actually dug into the allegations against Patricia from 1996. You know, that's a 30-year-old allegation.
Yeah,
but
man.
That just goes to show you the diligence that Ryan Day is doing.
Yeah. And that is, when you're at a place like Ohio State, when you know those things are going to pop up, you have to do your due diligence. You have to really dig deep. You have to ask those tough questions. You want to see how people are going to react when you ask them that question, right? That's a hard truth that you have to answer for when you look at something 30 years ago, when you know you're not that same person anymore. Like, those are some tough things that you have to answer. And so, you know, in those situations that you're going to get asked those questions. I'm sure Ryan Day obviously felt comfortable enough with the answers that he got and from the research that he felt good enough to hire Matt Patricia. But, you know, those are some, it's Ohio State. Like, you really have to vet everybody that you bring into this program. And I think Ryan Day does a good job of really being thorough, not just with the coaching staff, but with the players too, that he brings in with the transfer portal. Like, the culture is something that he It's his baby. Like, he really wants that to stay intact. Like, that is something that's very, very important to him. And so I appreciate and respect him, really going out and really, like you said, doing his due diligence to make sure that piece stays intact.
Yeah, absolutely. And then talking about Tyler Bowen, Day basically called it as we all saw it, that he was hired in that role because of both his offensive coordinating experience, his run game experience, and his recruiting prowess.
Yeah. I think Tyler Bowen, and we'll talk about him when we get into some of these recruits here in a second. I think Tyler Bowen was a great hire, man. I think he is such a good fit with Brian Hartline. You're talking matching energy with energy. You're talking matching skill with skill, right? Tyler Bowen's skill is the run game. Right. Everybody makes this huge deal about Tyler Bowen not being an offensive line coach in the last 7 years. He's coached tight ends. The guy played offensive line. If you coach tight ends and you are the offensive line coach, you also coach the offensive line. Okay. That's one thing people need to understand. Okay. The other part of it is, as a run game coordinator, your now strength is what you are coaching. And now you are meshing that with what Brian Hartline's strength is, and that is being elite in the pass game. And so I'm excited to see what these guys will be able to do together, because this is something that is going to help Coach Hartline so much when it comes to the run game. And Coach Hartline's going to learn so much from Tyler Bowen as well. And then they're just going to be so good on the recruiting trail together as well. And so I think this was such a good hire. And just to hear him talk, just he's a confident guy. He's a massive human being. I didn't realize how big, he was.
Right.
Like, you could even tell from just sitting down, like, oh my God, like, he's a big individual. And so I'm excited for this one. I thought he really knocked it out of the park, man. Him and Matt Patricia really did a really good job in the press conference, man. I thought they did a really good job and really showed why they were the picks for Ryan Day.
Yeah. Anybody that hasn't got a chance to listen, go back and watch some of that. You would be very impressed with both of those guys.
Yeah.
So then Coach Day talked about spring ball. We've hit on spring ball, what we think it's going to look like. And he basically said it's going to be more of an NFL OTA approach, which I think is going to become the standard.
Absolutely.
I don't listen to, I get about 20 minutes of sports radio a day. But I've heard Bobby Carpenter talking about it, but Coach Day said there are going to be helmet only practices this spring.
Yeah.
We're going to go as hard as we can, but you've got a lot of guys that have a lot of reps.
Yeah.
The most important thing is the quarterback battle, which he said is going to come down to leadership.
Yep.
And a quarterback doesn't need to be in full pads to show you what he can do.
No, I agree with that. And like you said, the biggest thing is going to come down to leadership. I think Will Howard did a really good job of really setting the standard for what that leadership needs to look like from here on out. That's not a knock on anybody that came before them. I think C.J. Stroud was a good leader. He led in a different way. Yeah. I think Justin Fields was a good leader. He led in a different way. Simba was a good leader. He led in a different way, right? I'm not disparaging anything that they did. I just think Will Howard set the standard for what a national championship caliber leader looked like. And I think that is what Ryan Day is going to be looking for. It may not look the exact same.
Not yet.
But they need to be able to command the huddle. And in the fourth quarter, can you go win me the game? Yep. I know for a fact when Will Howard got in the huddle, those guys looked at him and they knew they were going to go win. I know for a fact in that Georgia game, those guys looked at C.J. Stroud and said, we're going to go win that game. They did the same thing with Justin Fields. They did the same thing with Dwayne Haskins. That's what this guy needs to be able to do. And so you don't need pads to go out there and do that, right? We just need to be able to see that command. And so I'm all for being an OTA. I don't need to see what Jeremiah Smith can do in a spring game. I don't care. I don't care if he practices all spring.
Yep.
I don't need to see what Caleb Downs can do this spring. I don't care if he practices all spring. Kenyatta Jackson, Caden Curry, all these guys that we know who they are. IGB, like, cool, like whatever. They need the reps and practice, all right. But when it comes to a spring game, I don't need to see it. Okay. Caleb Downs played a lot of football. IGB played a lot of football. I don't need to see all these different reps. I need to see these young guys get reps, these depth pieces get reps. Some of these offensive linemen, young offensive linemen,
Yep.
they need to be the ones that are getting these reps. The Jarquez Carters, the guys that we are going to be depending on, those freshmen, those are the guys that need to be getting reps because we are going to be depending on some younger guys as those depth pieces. Those are the guys that we need to see get reps. And so I'm all for it being OTAs, man. Like if that's the way that it has to be, then that's the way that it has to be. And the one thing from all these press conferences that I really, really enjoyed was Coach Day really challenging the scheduling of these playoffs and how it
Yes.
really hurts the national champion. And one of the guys in the presser was like, well, you're probably just saying that because you won this year. And he was like, well, yeah. But, hopefully we're the ones complaining about this every year. But let's say we're not the ones that win. The team that wins next year is going to be complaining about the same thing. Between the transfer portal, the spring practice, the spring practice calendar and schedule, it all gets out of whack because of this playoff schedule. And so it's something that he's wanting the CFP, the NCAA to really take a hard look at because it's really hurting you for being the best team. Right? You're not being rewarded for being the best team in the country. And so I really love that Coach Day was really challenging a lot of those things, man. I thought that was awesome.
Yeah, and Ross Bjork was on 97.1 this week doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And he's very involved in a lot of the things that are going on. And he actually brought up something that I need to dive deeper into. And that is this profit sharing. And there's NIL regulation coming next month. It's not done by the NCAA, though. It's the Power 4 schools are trying to regulate it within themselves.
Yeah.
So I need to do a deeper dive in that, listening to what he had to say and looking into the parameters of that. So we'll be able to talk about that when I know more. And then Coach Day kind of did some self-reflection during his presser and said, he's continuing to evolve. That obviously his first year as a CEO worked. So, he wants to continue to become more involved in the NIL efforts. He's still obviously sitting in meetings, offensively, special teams, that type of thing. But it's cool to see him do that self-reflection stuff too.
Dude, it's one of the most underestimated things as a leader, as the head coach, as a leader in any situation, right? It's being able to remove your ego, take a step back, look at every situation, and honestly evaluate it. Right? That is one of the hardest things to do. I mean, you know it, right? In the workplace, like a situation gets messed up, and it's hard to admit, like, dang, I messed that up, man. Like, I got a special education clerk at work that I got to send paperwork to, and sometimes I make some clerical errors, and it's hard for me to send an email back to her saying like, oh, that's my fault. Sometimes I want to send her an email and be like, well, I got a lot going on. I have, you know what I mean? Like there's always something. It's hard to sit back and reflect. And so for Ryan Day to be able to do that, even after a national championship, to sit back and reflect, that shows that he's continually trying to grow and that this national championship isn't it. There's still a lot of things that he's got to do. He's got a Michigan problem. Right? There's still things that he's got to conquer. And I love that he's still willing to accept that. Right? Like this is like, okay, this is the standard now. I'm a national championship coach. How can I do it again? How can I beat Michigan? How can I win a Big Ten championship? Right? Those are the things that I need to accomplish. How do we get there? And so listen, man, that's what I want for my coach. That's what I would expect my players and my coaches to want for me when I'm running a program. Right? To be able to always want better, right? Never be complacent. And so I love to hear those things from Coach Day, man. It's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. That was kind of the bullet points I had written down. What else did you have written down from the presser that you wanted to hit on?
The big thing for me, man, was just when it came to Matt Patricia, I'm a defensive guy. That is something that I'm always going to pay attention to. To hear Matt Patricia talk about, being multiple, and talk about the things that he's willing to do with the defense and how it always just comes down to personnel and players. I cannot stress that enough. I want every coach to just take that to heart. I know he's got a past, he's got things that he wishes he would have done better. I loved hearing him say that he wished he would have done things differently, with Detroit and how he tried to take some of the things that he did from New England and he tried to take that to Detroit, but then he realized when he got to Detroit that it's not New England and he should have just been himself in Detroit. Right? That's self-reflection. It takes you time to be able to get there. So I just love hearing that from a coach. And now I love hearing the fact that he's just thinking about players, 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 because that is the lifeblood of your program.
Especially in college.
Especially in college, man. And if I'm a recruit, that's what I want to hear. I want to hear that I'm going to go play for a coach that's going to put me in the right freaking spot every single time and is not going to blame me for being the one that messed up, right? If I make a mistake, he's going to look at himself like, what did I not do? What did I not do to make sure that he was ready to do the right thing right there in that situation? Or he's going to make sure he's going to yell at me, but he's going to coach me up to make sure that it doesn't happen again. Like, I just get that vibe from Coach Patricia that his energy is much better and it's going to be good. I could be way off and he could be selling me a dream, but I just loved hearing some of the things he was talking about. I'm excited to get down to spring practice so I could see some of it in action. I loved seeing, the pencil, in the hat. Like that was awesome. And then the other thing I love Coach Johnson. I love how annoyed he gets when people ask him when he's going to retire. I think that's great. I love the fact that he openly said, I'm not opposed to running multiple fronts, right? I want to play the fronts that fit our personnel. Like, that's just it. And that's what any coach wants to do, right? You want to play what fits our personnel. Well, guess what's going to fit our personnel this year? It's not going to be a 4-down front. I can tell you that much, right? And so those are the things I love hearing from our coaching staff. It sounds like everybody's on the same playing field. And so I just thought, the coaching staff did a really good job. Young, energetic, Billy Fessler, extremely smart, going to be a really good coach, going to be an offensive coordinator soon. Coach Hartline, just endless energy. Coach G is a nerd. You can just hear it when he talks. Like, he is just a football nerd. Like, and so I really like the staff, man. I just think it's a really good staff, and I'm just excited. I think Coach Day has done a good job of putting these guys together. Then Coach Locke, though, that was the other thing. Did you hear Coach Locke talk about? Oh man, it was the greatest thing. I sent it in the group text. With Carson.
Let me pull that up.
Talking about we'll have to put it on our Facebook page or something, but talking about, I'm not giving no job to James Peoples.
Oh yeah, because everybody thought James Peoples was going to slide in, and he was like, no. I'm already starting to hear things. A lot of people saying buy Bo Jackson stock.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I haven't listened to it yet, but Coach Locke did the Berm and Austin Ward series. I haven't listened to it yet.
Oh, it's good, man. He's so country.
I love it.
Yeah.
So I'm excited. And, just in case anybody wondered, Coach G would definitely be Slate's Man Crush Monday. And that's okay. Or Football Crush Friday, however you want to throw it out there. A little bit of recruiting news. I'm sure there are people freaking out.
Yep.
Adam Guthrie, in-state, a 4-star offensive lineman from Miami Trace, goes to Clemson. Perfect storm. I think this is one of those kids that wanted out of the state. You see that in that area a lot of times. Jackson Carman syndrome. And guess what? We were okay. I'm not saying that Adam Guthrie's Jackson Carman, because he's handled his business totally different.
Yeah.
He committed to Clemson early. He made no bones about it. He didn't really shy away from the fact that there was a real deal there.
Yeah.
Tyler Bowen has a year to get it right still, though.
Yeah.
And you're kind of seeing that with Maxwell Riley.
Yeah.
Another Ohio kid who we thought would be committed to Clemson by now.
Yeah.
But he's not. And he's coming to Ohio State in the spring.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that Guthrie or that Riley's going to end up a Buckeye because I don't know. But I think when it's all said and done, Tyler Bowen is going to have us in a very good spot with a lot of offensive linemen headed into the fall.
Yeah, I think so too. I think the one thing that we need to understand is that not everybody grows up in Ohio as a Buckeye fan. I think people need to understand that. And I also think people need to understand that Clemson does a great job of recruiting the state of Ohio. I'm just going to be very honest about that. I've been around a few kids now, my last 5 years of coaching, who have been recruited by Clemson, and they do a phenomenal job. I cannot lie about that. They do a really good job of building authentic, real relationships. They are constant. They do not let up. They are on the phone, calling, texting, FaceTiming all the time. Whenever they can, they try to get in town as much as possible. Dabo invites them to his house personally all the time. When they are in town and he wants to offer them a scholarship, he invites them to his house, not his office, not anything like that. Like, it's a very personal thing. And so I will give Clemson credit, man. They do a great job in the state of Ohio. And I would not be shocked if they pull a few more kids out of the state of Ohio in the 2026 class. That's how good they are doing in the state of Ohio. With that said, I do think, especially with the offensive line, I do think Coach Bowen has got to get one of the two out of on the offensive line. He's got to get Sam Greer, and he's got to get Max Riley. I personally think Sam Greer is a must get because his ceiling is through the freaking roof. You just need to go Google Sam Greer basketball highlights, and this kid is special, right? He is special. I think Maxwell Riley is a very special player as well. And so I think we could end up with both of these guys in the 2026 class, and then possibly one more tackle as well. But I think Coach Bowen has to be able to land one of these two tackles out of the state of Ohio. I do think you're going to see us land a couple interior guys out of the state of Ohio. I do think we're going to get some of those, mid to upper rated 3-stars that are just road graders. I would not be shocked if, Matt Wilhelmson ends up in this class because he just is grinding away and just working his tail off. And that's the type of guy that's trying to earn that offer. And so I would not be shocked if he ends up in this class. But I do think Coach Bowen has to do a really good job and knock it out of the park with Sam Greer and Max Riley. I think those two guys have to end up in this class, especially Sam Greer. I think Max Riley's really good, and I want him in this class. But I think Sam Greer's upside is through the roof, man. And so Adam Guthrie, and I think Guthrie's a good player. He's also a very good basketball player, great feet, 6'8", 6'7". He's got just really good feet. He could do a lot of good things. I think Clemson got a really good football player. Clemson does a really good job in the state of Ohio, guys, and we have to understand that they're not going anywhere. They're going to continue to recruit the crap out of the state of Ohio, and so they do a really good job. Coach Luke is our offensive line coach. He's a really, really good one. He's a really good one, man. So understand this won't be the last one that they pull out of the state of Ohio in these next two classes.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you're going to see the trade-off is going to be, I think you're going to see Ohio State be more involved with a lot of those DMV offensive linemen where we've always struggled before. Yes, you want the Ohio kids, but in this day and age, it's not as easy as it was. Coach Luke is a stud. I mean, there was talk that, if Ohio State was going to make a swing for the fences higher, that it could have been him.
Yeah.
So we'll dive more into that. Obviously we keep saying we want to talk about 26 recruiting, and we do. But, Ryan Day keeps giving us things to talk about.
Yeah.
But we'll get there. There was a Fong bomb today for a safety from Olentangy. But, we'll see what happens there because, as Coach Slate has said on here before, Caden plays things close to the vest. So, best of luck to him, as he goes through the process still. I think 26 recruiting wise for now. That kind of ties that up. One quick little note: the NCAA did receive Michigan's response to the NOA, and Michigan has shoved all Freedom of Information Act requests out 90 more days. So something's brewing there. And it does sound like another party. I don't understand the NCAA dashboard. I just take, the guys that do as I follow them. And it looks like there are 3 parties that have reached negotiated settlements through all this.
Okay.
Sounds like one of them is Central Michigan, which probably doesn't bode well for the team up north.
Okay.
So we'll see there. And then, real quick, as we do discuss the Browns sometimes, Myles Garrett got paid.
God, he got paid, man.
He got paid. Was it $40 million a year, basically? No trade clause. You got DK Metcalf getting traded to the Steelers today, even though there's nobody there to throw him the ball. Josh Allen got paid today. Devontae Adams is going to the Rams. Baron Browning got paid. And free agency technically hasn't even started yet. Going to be interesting to see because the Myles Garrett thing really hurts a couple of teams. The Bengals are going to have to pay Jamar Chase a whole lot more money because they said they wanted to make him the highest non-paid quarterback.
Yep.
And Micah Parsons is going to get paid too.
He's going to get paid.
So, we're a month and a half away still from the draft. And obviously we will do a draft preview like we did last year. Funny draft topic though. I've made no bones about I'm not sold on Cam Ward.
Okay.
Our in-house Miami fan, loyal listener, texted me today. And he goes, all we got to do now is he's a Brown season ticket holder. So kudos to the guy for being loyal. We love you, Brandon. He goes, all we got to do now is re-sign Nick Chubb and trade with Tennessee. And I'm like, there's nobody in this draft worth trading up one spot for because that worked real well when we did it for Trent Richardson.
Yeah.
And he goes, what would it have to take for you to text me and tell me you were wrong about Cam Ward if the Browns get him? And I said, winning a Super Bowl. He goes, so if he has a Jaden Daniels type year, you wouldn't say you were wrong. I go, not after 1 year, no. He goes, well, then I hope you've never said CJ Stroud's legit. CJ Stroud is really, really good. But you saw in year 2 of being a quarterback, the fall off. The tape is there, and now granted, CJ Stroud's offensive line is horrendous. But I'm just going to go ahead and bookmark it at 10:37 on Sunday night the 9th that if Cam Ward wins 2 division titles in his first 4 years, if he's a Brown, I will admit I was wrong.
Oh gosh, I don't even care anymore. I don't even care. Just draft whoever you think's going to win games. If you think Cam's going to win games, draft him. If you think Shador's going to win games, draft him. Jackson Dart, draft him. I don't care. Just
don't draft Will Howard. He deserves better.
Yeah. Just draft who you think's going to win games and get us out of this rut.
It's brutal, man.
Yeah.
On a local front, shout out to River Valley boys basketball.
Absolutely.
Made it to the Elite 8. Hit a little bit of a buzzsaw today. Colonel Crawford, Final Four. We have some Crawford County listeners. Beating Lima Central Catholic yesterday. Anytime you can. Yeah.
That's a big win.
Yeah. Just out physical. I watched a little bit of it. And the River Valley boys actually gave it a run to catch back up today. They just dug themselves too big of a hole. But they're young. They got some dogs.
Yeah.
Anytime you got another Myers and another Smith coming up, they're going to shoot you out the gym. So that's all I got, I think, though.
That's all I got, man.
All right. Well, with that said, we will see you guys again next week. And again, shout out, Chris at the barn, Jake at Cornerstone, we wouldn't be here. Chugging along, trying to step this thing up. Shout out our guy Carson. Another great week on the IG. We're getting close, guys, to kind of making this thing. We're blowing this thing up. But we will see you guys next week unless anything pops off in the middle of the week.